Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Dave Lindsay, all the way from Sydney, Australia. Thanks for jumping on today. He is a former rugby league player, former MMA fighter, former arm wrestler. And we can tell that story where his arm was snapped, but current professional speaker. Thanks for being here today, David.
My absolute pleasure, Justin. I'm super excited to be sharing this platform with you, with your listeners, and hopefully we can give them some nuggets along the way. I'm happy to share my story and take it wherever you want to lead it. It's your dance.
Perfect. So we were just chatting offline about how you never wanted to be a coach. You wanted to be an athlete, but you ended up coaching. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you ended up doing that when your life goal was to be an athlete.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess it's like, most of the kids growing up, you see the athletes on TV and you always dream and aspire to be an athlete on TV. And I was quite good. I'm not the biggest bloke going around, not by any means, but I got into rugby league, which you may or may not know. It's quite a physical sport. It's basically Australia's version of gridiron over there. So being a little guy, I had to rely on my skills, my strength, and my speed. And also my mindset as well to be able to overcome these bigger guys. And I played for South Sydney Rabbitohs, which is the most successful NRL team in the history of the NRL. And I played for them and we actually won a competition with the under-17s. Unfortunately, I suffered a knee reconstruction with that, which that sort of put me on hold for a little bit. But that gave me also time to get bigger, to get stronger, and come back even better. So I managed to do that. But when I was 22 years old, I suffered my second knee reconstruction just as I was about to take the leap into full-time professional because I played semi-professional. And then I always said, if I had a second knee reconstruction, well, that would be it for me. Maybe football isn't the game. So I was still incredibly big and strong at that point. And a guy came up to me at the shopping center and goes, "Excuse me, this is going to sound weird, but have you ever tried arm wrestling?" And I go, "You know what? I've done it with my mates at the pub for drinks." And he goes, "How do you go?" And I go, "When I do it with my mates, I don't buy drinks, they buy them for me." And we laughed and he goes, "Have I thought about doing it as a sport?" And my mind sort of just exploded a little bit then because when I never even knew of arm wrestling as a sport, but he gave me his card and he was the president of the Australian Arm Wrestling Federation. So I went and I did quite a bit of training for him. With everything I do, I jump both feet in. I'm not one of these people that goes half in, half out, because if you're half in, half out, you're never really anywhere. So jump both feet in. And I went really well. I beat bodybuilders, I beat other arm wrestlers, and was on my way across to the States to go in some professional arm wrestling tournaments. And as we spoke before, I was arm wrestling with a mate in Corfu, Greece, and I turned my body and I snapped my arm. So I snapped the humerus, the upper part of my arm. And at first, I actually thought that the bar was broken because it sounded like a dry piece of wood getting snapped across your leg. But then I looked at my arm and it was kind of bent a bit funny and go, shit, wrapped my arm up and went, okay, well, straight off to hospital. Then that stopped me and my girlfriend at the time. Luckily, she stuck around. She's my wife now and we have a lovely daughter as well. But she stuck around through this. We flew back to Australia. So that was the end of our around the world trip. I got a plate put in my arm and then my arm became paralyzed for 4 months. So instantly I thought, man, my life as an athlete is over. I've been competitive since the day I was a little kid. I'm still competitive now and I still want to be competitive all the way till I draw my last breath. So it took my whole identity away from me as David the athlete, David the footballer, David the arm wrestler. But then once I started to get some movement back, I got excited again. And where I did my Cert 3, Cert 4 personal training course, across the road there was a Kung Fu school. So when that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shift my attention to martial arts. And I did Kung Fu, Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, and wrestling, and worked my skills up in that. And from that, got my black belt in Kung Fu, got up to purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu. I loved wrestling though. Wrestling and my wrestling coach really altered my journey. But I went and had some cage fights. I had a professional boxing match as well. I'm not a boxer by any stretch of the imagination. I'm more of a grappler, but I thought I'd go out and test it. And then from there, having conversations with my wrestling coach along the way really steered me in different directions, because I've been strengthening and conditioning coach for South Sydney, the junior rep teams, the 3 junior rep teams. I'd help fighters with their preparations. I'd coach and train them. But he goes, David, with coaching and training and working in the gym as well, I can hit 1-to-1, 1-to-30. But with speaking, you can hit 1-to-thousands, 1-to-millions. And that way I can really make an impact. And it's as a result of that why I'm speaking to you over in the States, all the way from Australia. And as I said, offline as well, I've got a tour coming up in November where we're just going to Phoenix, Arizona for a fundraiser. But it's really opened up my eyes and broadened my scope as well.
I love that. And it's so many different things I want to ask you about, but I got to kind of narrow this. So as I told you before we started recording, that my mother's from Australia, and this is probably going to be your favorite episode no matter what you say, simply because I'm talking to an Aussie. But that aside, what I'm curious about that has nothing to do with your journey, but because I've always tried to understand this. What is the difference between rugby and Aussie rules football in like a 5-second soundbite? And then I'm going to come back to the real interview.
Yeah, because basically AFL is like soccer, where you can be offside. You don't have to be behind the line of scrummage like in gridiron, whereas with Rugby Union and Rugby League, you have to be behind the line of scrummage. So Rugby League is very much like that. AFL and soccer is, all over the place. Short and sharp.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Now I have a better concept of what we're doing there. So let's talk about this before we get into the coaching aspect of this. What was the transition like going from a team sport like rugby to an individual pursuit in arm wrestling and then in your martial arts type endeavors, right? Both in the cage, both in the boxing ring, you said grappling, wrestling, but those are really different deals, right? You have a team-based deal where you have to rely on everybody to, sorry, bro, you're by yourself, figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And in fighting, arm wrestling's a different story, but in fighting as well, you still have your team around you. So I'd have 3 different coaches with that. I'd have countless sparring partners as well, all of with which, you wouldn't make it to the cage. So it still has that team environment. And that's what I really love. And it's the same in business, same in basketball, baseball. Every position has a different skill set and a different mindset. And I love the way how that just all comes together. So in rugby league, it's not always the biggest, the fastest, the strongest. They're not necessarily the best team player. So you want to have the best person for that position. But the mindset really, I like to bring the sporting world across into everything. And that's a team environment across into especially cage fighting. With boxing, it was more individual because there was only a couple of blokes that I sparred with. But yeah, for me, the mindset is very similar, because with cage fighting, I needed to know my wrestling, my submissions, my boxing, my kickboxing, Muay Thai. So with that, you need to get all the different strengths in and rely upon the team in general. So it does really come across.
Yes. And while it is a team in that sense, and you described it perfectly, I think, in that you couldn't have got there without your team, right? But once you're in the fight, like you're by yourself. And that's a very different approach than, say, rugby, which I fully don't understand, but there are certain people that are supposed to score. There are certain people that are supposed to block. And if you try to do somebody else's job, it's usually not very productive.
Yeah.
How did you rationalize, the best word I can come up with, but that moment when you're either trying to get a submission or you're in that situation where you're, under the pressure and like, you can't hey, teammate, come and save me. No, like you're by yourself. Like, give me a little bit of that mindset shift and what that meant in the heat of competition, not the lead up.
Yeah. And I love being in that position of where I live and die by the sword. So if I make a mistake, that's my fault. If I win, that's my fault. Everything, once it comes into the cage, even the preparation, if I go in not fit enough, not strong enough, if for some reason I'm overweight, that's all my fault. Whereas, yeah, with rugby league, I may have the best game, but if the winger misses a tackle or two and they end up scoring, well, then the team loses. So I love when the pressure is on me, when I have full the results rely upon me. And that's what I like. And that's what I like with speaking as well. If I get up and speak, or even whether it's to a rugby league team, if my message doesn't get across to them, that's a result of me not being engaging, me not understanding the different concepts. So again, when it comes back to me, I really enjoy that. A lot of people don't, but I do.
Well, I also want to focus on the fact that your athleticism and competitiveness were innately transferable across disciplines. And one of the things that I think in the United States, at least, that has happened to what I call the youth sports industrial complex is sports specialization at a young age has kind of taken over the landscape. And I don't know if it's like that in Australia. Maybe you can speak to that. But what I'd love to know is, as you had that experience yourself, going from one discipline to another to finding the next thing, and the transition, while probably not easy, there was definitely transferability. How would you share at a base level your work as a trainer, let's call it? How do you train for baseline athletic success versus specificity depending on the athlete that you're working with? And I know that's a mouthful, but go wherever you want with that.
Yeah, no, and I understand 100% what you're saying, because when I had the 3 representative rugby league teams, it's not just throw one program to everyone. You can't do that, because rugby league is a great sport where it does encompass, you need endurance, you need speed, you need size, you need agility. But then, as I said before, different positions require different skill sets. So what I'd like to do is I always try and set that foundation. So the first 3-4 weeks when they're coming back from their off season is to build up that base. And then you start splitting them up into their areas. But with the kids especially, I don't like how parents are going, okay, you're going to be a professional golfer when they're 5 years old. I believe that try everything you can, because I started off playing soccer. I played t-ball. I played baseball. I played up to state level of baseball. I played golf. I played all these different things, and then I fell into rugby league. And even though I'm not the biggest, it was a mindset as well of trying to overcome the big guys. And it's that mindset that I try and get across into the athletes as well, because that really is the most powerful thing. My wrestling coach was big on that as well, and I've followed his suit, because like we spoke about before, it's about having the mentors around. You take what works and you discover what doesn't. My wrestling coach was my biggest influence on me, both as an athlete, like even though wrestling was one of the last sports, but me as a coach, as a trainer, as an overall person, because it all comes back to the mindset. So you can have a Ferrari and it can go on a track, a super fast car. But if the driver, your mind, if they can't control it, they're going to lose it on the first corner. Whereas you might have a little mini minor going along, yet they've got their most skilled driver. So you can have this little person come in and they beat you mentally. Well, then they've won the game. So that's another thing that I'd like to throw in with all the sports teams that I coach, is the importance of the mindset, the importance of teamwork, because if you have good teamwork, you have good morale. You have good morale, people are willing to do more for people that they know, like, and trust in sports, in every element of life.
No doubt. And since you brought that up, I want to follow up with what I usually ask is, what's the best thing you do in your program that you would take with you were you to leave your current job and go do it somewhere else? Your version of this, especially the way you described your wrestling coach, who was your last coach, had the biggest impact. So were you to go back and coach a team sport, what would you take that would allow you to build that culture that you just identified as the key to this whole thing? What are some tangible takeaways that you could offer others that are like, hey, you want to have a great experience as an individual or a team? Look, these are some things that you want in every single program.
Yeah, and one of the big things that I like is autonomy as well. Is, you know, the first training session or the first couple of training sessions is for me really to take a step back, because I used to go in like a bull at a gate and go rah, rah, rah. But now I like to take a step back and see, you know, there's a natural pecking order that goes in amongst the team. So finding out who the leaders are amongst the team, and then I basically communicate mostly with them. So it might be 3 or 4 players in particular, and then I let them take the lead. So long as they're within my scope of what I want to achieve, they know the plays, they know the structure that I go with, but it's giving them that autonomy, helps build them up both as rugby league people, but as people in general. Because when they're like 17, 18, 19, 20, they're not quite playing first grade yet. So they can't rely upon rugby league as their full-time income. So it's giving them those skills outside of sport as well. So a big one is autonomy, telling you what I want and letting you execute it, and having the team follow as well.
So if you're giving this autonomy, here's what I need you to get done, and you're letting them run with that, what is the strategy then for providing, let's say, corrections or getting them, if they completely go off the wrong way towards what you asked them? Talk a little bit about strategy for giving that type of feedback in regards to making sure that you as the coach and them as the athletes are in alignment.
Yeah, and feedback is a very important thing. And I like to instill that early on, the importance of both giving feedback, but also receiving feedback. Whenever any of the players get feedback, it should never be from left field, because I don't just say, go do that and then step back. I'm still there, and the other coaches are all still there as well, like constantly talking to them, constantly going, okay, what about this play? What about this play? What about that? Giving guidance along the way. But whenever they get feedback, it's never from a blind side. And it's also, it has that trickle effect down as well, where the players as well, because they know how I give feedback, they know how to receive that feedback. And they also know how to give feedback amongst each other as well. So it's never just turn my back on them and go. It's about being able to coach them from a distance.
So let's talk about feedback. What are ways in which you have learned that feedback does not land well? And what should people avoid? And what are ways in which you have seen feedback be received well? And what are some strategies for making it as effective as possible? And any stories help? Just the way in which you've seen it in all this aspect of your current stage and station in life, what can you offer in regards to giving and receiving feedback?
There's no one size fits all, because the way that I speak to fighters is very, very different to the way I speak to people in the corporate world. The way that I speak to footballers is very, very different to the way that I speak to soccer players. I'd prefer the way, because I really have to tone it down when I'm speaking with corporates compared to when I'm speaking with fighters. Because when you're fighting as well, you know, it's an instant. Because if they get knocked out, that is in an instant. Whereas with the corporate world, it might be 6 months, 12 months down the track when they go, oh, why isn't this working? And you go, well, because we spoke about this, this, and this, you didn't alter your gameplay. And as a result, this has happened. So it's, very individual. I try and be as straightforward as they can handle. And you can tell pretty much straight away. I try not to sugarcoat it, because if you get lost in the fluff and all this sort of stuff, it doesn't really help anyone. And Justin, what I'd say to other people that I'm on the podcast with as well is, unfortunately, I'm going to be a better guest on the next person's podcast, because I'm still the same with myself as I am with people that I coach, where I always expect improvement each and every time. To go back and reflect. If I say something to them, go back and reflect on, why did I say that? I don't say things just to blow hot air or to blow smoke up their skirt. I say things for a reason. So think about, okay, why did he say this? How can I improve that? How can I put on a display where it's not just for themselves either? It's, if they elevate themselves, the players around them will tend to elevate as well. And that's where the whole team starts to improve. And that's really where you get that winning culture as well. When people want to do it for each other, they want to do it for themselves, they want to do it for their mates. And as a result, they do it for the team. So yeah, that's a big thing that I'm about.
So let me ask this question, and it's a little bit loaded. So dance as you need to. As you work with corporate people, let's say organizations, individuals, whatever we want to do there.
Yep.
Can you, and in what ways can you identify and or tell that they are former athletes in the way in which they go about their business?
You can 100%. And it's like night and day. And also it's night and day if they played a sports team compared to if they played individual. Because when they play sports team, you can see that they band together, that they're not just looking out for themselves. And also it tends to be the mindset of people that were, and when I say athletes, I'm not talking about, the normal run, but the elite athletes. They've got that different sort of mindset where it's always, like I said, I'm going to be competitive until hopefully my last breath. They don't just click their fingers and become competitive and not. You can see it a mile away. And like with that competitive part, you can see it a mile away when they're part of a team. Because I've been to companies where there was no athletes there whatsoever. And I found it kind of hard to initially to get my ideas across because I can be quite stern. I can be quite abrupt. And they didn't really receive that too well. And that's feedback that I got. And I had to go and reflect on that and go, okay, David, how can I make it a little bit softer? But then when it comes to athletes, they take the challenge on board. And more than that, they rise to it and go, set another one. Set the bar higher this time. And they're the type of people that I really enjoy working with.
So let me ask this, because you have been an individual athlete, you've been a team athlete, you've coached both of those spaces, you've worked in corporate, you've worked in athletics. What advice do you have for coaches specifically that are struggling with people on their team that aren't fully embracing the team concept, right? They are the star athlete, or they have noise from outside influences in their head saying you got to do X, Y, and Z. Right? Because you just mentioned it's night and day. You can tell someone that was a team sport versus an individual. So what have you learned about bringing them together so that the individual light is not dimmed, but the team goals are still being supported? How can you advise coaches that are listening, maybe some techniques to help bring them together in pursuit of the common goal?
Yeah, because a lot of times you hear people talk about the vision of the company. They talk about the end goal. But when you get down to it, a lot of people, especially once you get a little bit down, whether they're athletes, they know it's to score points, but they don't know how they're going to go about it. So making sure that everyone's on the same page. The way that I did this originally when I first started strength conditioning, because that's what I started off in, was I didn't care if you loved me or hated me, but I wanted the whole team to do it all together. And it started off that they didn't like me, but they respected it as well. Where, like I said, with rugby league, you can do that. I don't care if you hate me. We're going to get the end results at the end of the day. And that's what they get paid for. That's what the coaches get paid for, is for the end results. But it's funny how that hate is a strong word. That dislike for me, how that turned around by very, very early on, that turned around to a love for me and also respect for me as well. Because there was one time when I was doing some training while they were out on the field. I was doing my own weight training in the gym, and I didn't realize they were coming in. And they came in and saw that I was benching more than them. I was doing dips with 60-kilo weights around my waist as well. So it's both that, the fact that I didn't care if they didn't like me to start off with, but then they saw that I don't teach people how to swim because I'm not a swimmer. If I ask you to do something, it's because I've been there, done that, and I'll do it again. So I don't like where people say, do this, and yet they act the complete opposite. So if I ask to do something, people know that I've been there, done that, and I'll do it again.
Yeah, no, I think it's super helpful when you're walking the walk, right? Rather than talking out of both sides of your mouth.
Yeah.
I want to get into your process here, which you mentioned you can't have the same deal for everybody or as a group. Everyone's got to have some individualization, but yet as you come in as a speaker, or a corporate coach in a sense, what is your application of your 5-step process, but how do you individualize it at the same time? So if you give a quick overview of what your expertise is, but then how you've had to tweak it over the years to make sure that each piece landed the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, 100%. Because what I do when I go in, I speak about my 5 steps towards improved vitality. And that takes everything from the sports world and brings it across to the corporate world. So that's creating teamwork, creating energy, vim, vigor, and passion. And you get that in sports, you win. You get that in business, you win. So the 5 steps quickly are creating routines and rituals to snap into action. So whether that's utilizing the power of music, using posture, using doorways as you come in. It's like doing your warm-up in football, in wrestling. You know, we do it the same all the time, which is why it can snap into action. Then the second one is napping for peak performance. And that's where, like in gridiron, you don't have the same team doing the same thing all the time. In rugby league, you're not sprinting 100% of the time. You work in short, intense bursts. And it's the same in the corporate world as well. You'd be surprised how much you can get done when you work in short, intense chunks, when you're single focused on the task at hand. It's not allowing distractions to overcome. Then the third one is tapping, is learning, like, failure is going to happen, but learning why you fail. Fail fast, fail forward, tap, and evolve. Because I can't remember what year it was. I was watching it only a few weeks ago, the Super Bowl where the team came back from so far behind. Was that about 2016? Around about that time. And they didn't keep playing the same play all the time. Once it got to halftime and they were so far behind, it was almost like they go, let's throw the rule book out the window and let's play a different game. And that way they came back from so far behind. It was a ridiculous amount and won the Super Bowl. Because when things aren't working, do it from a different angle. Do something different, whether that's in sports, whether it's in business, in any part of life. If I'm going to walk into a wall, eventually I have to step back and look for a door, a way around it, a way over it. You know, it's common sense, but not common practice. Then the fourth one is clapping, is celebrating, all about bringing the team together. Like I've mentioned it before, where you're willing to do more for people that you know, like, and trust. In the sports world, in the corporate world, in your family world, you're willing to do more, go more, spend more time helping them out, spend more time helping yourself out. Then the fifth one is recap, which is all about continuous, never-ending improvement. And no doubt you guys do it as coaches. Well, you should be doing it where you watch the game and you take down notes, what worked, what didn't work. Then you do a video session because you don't see it all at once. A video session with the coaches. Then you do it a third time. This time you have a layout of what the coaches see, what worked and what didn't work. But then it opens lines of communications, not just top to bottom, but bottom to top. And this is what I was talking about, like with autonomy. You're getting feedback from the players. What didn't work? Why didn't it work? But also, how can we overcome those problems? But also, you're never to throw anyone under the bus. If in gridiron, if it was a wide receiver, drop the ball 3 or 4 times, we know, everybody in the team knows. So that's my job as a coach, to show him maybe how to catch it correctly. Or maybe you have him playing in the wrong position. Maybe he might be the world's best quarterback, but you have him playing in the wrong position. So that's for the coaches to think about. So that's a 5 steps towards improved vitality. And with that, people can personalize it themselves. What music works for the individual? What routine works for the individual? So there's always different ways to go about it.
So to recap, snapping, napping, tapping, clapping, recap.
Correct. That's it.
Got it.
And 5 steps towards improved vitality.
Yeah, well, and I love a couple of things you said, fail fast, fail forward, because ultimately failure is the best feedback, right?
Yes.
If you're willing to receive it. That's what's great about athletics, is you get it instantly versus sometimes you mentioned in the corporate world, it might be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months before you get the feedback because you're waiting for things to happen. Can you talk a little bit about failure, and specifically as you've moved into the coaching space? Do you have a favorite failure that has allowed you to rebound and become a better coach because you, let's say, did so poorly at it initially?
Yeah, definitely. And that's where it was a big change for me, going from coaching fighters to coaching people in the corporate world. And it was that harshness where some people, they just put up the fence straight away. And if you can't communicate with people, they're not going to take anything you say on board, or you even get people that, push against you and do the exact opposite. And I did have that where I was too harsh. I think it was about with the third or fourth person that I coached, and they were just they were doing things. I don't know whether it was intentionally, or we have the unconscious bias as well, where if I'd say one thing, they'd do the other. And it actually got to the point where I went, listen, you're not doing what I'm doing, what I'm asking. You're wasting your time. You're wasting my time. You're wasting your money. So she probably should have fired me, because I was quite green at that point as well. I didn't take a step back and look, David, it's me. It was my communication skills. And now what I do as well, whenever things don't work, I take responsibility for myself, because as I mentioned earlier, if I give them too much autonomy and they run riot and I'm not there sort of guiding them and the other coaches, that's my fault. If they have to rein them in, I'm the person to rein them in. And so you have to take responsibility for your actions. But that was probably a big one early on, where it was too much like a bull at a gate, too much just bah, 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 as opposed to softening it down and really playing what's in front of you.
Well, I think you said something that's super important there, that you take responsibility. And I think all of us, be it coach, athlete, non-athlete, player, normal society member, the sooner we can get to the question, what role did I play in this? It makes life a whole lot easier, because you are now focusing on a controllable rather than what somebody else is doing.
100%.
And I think that's something that's super aware that you mentioned, that I think people hopefully will latch on to. Let me ask a follow-up here in regards to mindset. So I usually end with something I stole from Dave Stahoviak, which is, what is something you've most recently changed your mind on? And I usually ask it from a coaching perspective, but I've gotten to the place now where it's really a growth mindset question as a whole. And so I'm just curious if you have something that, like, hey, I used to be dug in over here for good reason, and actually now I'm over here and here's why. And I'd love to hear the stories behind why people change their mind after being in a certain position in their thinking.
Yeah, I guess with that one as well, it comes back to probably, I'm guessing when I snapped my arm really was a big one, because I had so much time to think about stuff. And even though I went on and did fighting afterwards, something that I never used to do, I never used to read books. I never used to worry about personal development in myself. When I broke my arm, that gave me time I had nothing but time. And I'm no good at like even with this today, I'm standing up, I'm doing stuff. I'm no good at sitting down, but I forced myself to sit down and read books. And that really helped me to educate myself, because I'd finished school by that point. I didn't go to university, but self-education, I believe, is the best thing that people can do, because when you learn it, whether it's at high school, whether it's at university, you're learning their system. Self-education, when you really want to learn about something, you go a lot deeper with that. So that's something, when I was playing sports, I went, I don't have time to do that. I'm too busy with training. I'm too busy with this. Now that I'm on the flip side, I sort of go, that's one of the few things I go, I wish I had have done earlier, because I do my best to not live with regrets, because that's one thing I don't want to do. I don't want to be sitting in my rocking chair when I'm old going, oh, I would have been the best person if only I had have done that. Because if only can go jump. It's if only doesn't matter. It's what have you done? And that's something that I like to stick with people as well, is getting that mindset. And I love how you said growth mindset. A lot of people aren't even aware about the growth and fixed mindset, where they go, oh, I was an athlete. that's what I was like at high school. That's what I am now. That's just the way I am. As opposed to going, no, that's what I was 10 years ago. Now I'm a family person. I'm a business person. I can educate myself in order to get bigger, to get better, and to make a bigger difference in the world as well.
So let me ask a follow-up on that then, and you can choose what you want to share here, but but it's more about like, okay, you started reading, you started doing self-development, you started obviously going into the space that you're in now. You have to constantly be expanding your toolbox. But what I want to know is like, what's something that you've most recently read that you thought was really powerful or heard that has now been part of your toolbox that you're using that you can offer others? Or another way to do this is what's the book you've most recently recommended to people that's been front of mind?
Yeah, there's 3 books in particular, because I was looking for it as you're talking, because I was going to pick it up, but it's in my bag because I read it. Is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, Relentless by Tim Grover, and well, this is one right here, The One Thing. So that's where you really concentrate on doing one thing, do it exceptionally well. And that's, like I said, even with NAP, where you concentrate on one thing, you don't allow all those distractions. With me, it's about increasing performance, whether it's in sport, whether it's in corporate, whether it's in any other part of life. It's about raising vitality. And I've just been going with that I've been speaking for the last 8 years now, and just diving deep into that. And that has helped me. But yeah, those 3 books, Relentless, The One Thing, and Extreme Ownership. And if you're not good at reading, I'd recommend watching Jocko's TED Talk on that, because the way that he does it, I look at it from a different perspective, because from a speaking perspective, the way that he holds the pauses, the way that his voice, that it goes along, it hits you. And it's something, that is worthwhile for everybody.
Yeah, and I would echo that. The Extreme Ownership and Relentless, I've definitely read, and The One Thing I've read the summary of, but it's like you get your one takeaway from Jocko. He was just talking on something this morning I was listening to where it's just like, good. Whatever's happening, good. Gives me an opportunity to get better, right? So like your dog gets hit by a car, good. Like, let me figure out how to deal with that, whatever it is. And it's just like he said, is hilarious.
Yeah, I love that, where it goes, you didn't get the funding, good. So we can practice with these old guns. I didn't get that, good. So we can get tougher, we can get stronger, that's a great way to think about it. Like with the coaches, if they want this new piece of equipment in the gym that's going to help their players, you don't get it, good. What can I think about? What's a different exercise I can use that will get something similar, or may even end up with a better result? So it's a great mindset to have.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up with some advice for people that are listening. Where can people find you if they want to follow up, if they want to see you in Phoenix when they come, or heck, if they're in Australia, where is David Lindsay showing up on a regular basis for people?
Yeah, certainly. I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's where I tend to do most of my stuff. I put up 4 or 5 videos a week there. Also on Facebook and Instagram as well. So I do that mostly on LinkedIn. And yeah, like I said, I'll be in Phoenix in November. It's only a quick fire one, but feel free to hit me up there. Or if people have questions, feel free to email me as well on david@davidlindsay.com.au. I'm more than happy to connect with people and hopefully, give them some little bits of inspiration, some little gold nuggets that they can take away. And you never know, speak to them in the future.
Absolutely. Well, I talk about that a lot on the show, golden nuggets. And if you're paying attention, people are dropping them all around you if you are willing to pick them up. So I think that's
so long as you're looking there as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this has been fun. We were joking earlier about the time difference. It's 8 p.m. here and 1 p.m. there. So, and you're a day ahead. So hopefully I'll catch up to you by tomorrow.
Beautiful. Love it. And thank you very much, Justin. I've had a blast.